Hello, welcome to Follow the Moon. My name is Lilo Mari. Today I'm going to be sharing with you what I've been reading this month. It is January 2025 and I read 7 books this month. Mostly literary fiction, with some poetry and some essays and then one dystopia. And let's get into it. So first book, Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. This was a crazy book to start the year off with. So it's literary fiction, but also a little bit of horror. A lot of horror, actually. Oh god, how do I describe it? Okay, so there's a young girl who believes that she's an alien, and that she has magical powers. And she uses this to like escape the reality of her situation, which is that she lives in Japan. There's like a lot of pressure to conform. She's experiencing like abuse in her family. She's experiencing abuse from a teacher. And she uses this idea that she's an alien and that she has powers to feel like she has more control over the situation, and that what's happening is actually not that. Like this, the alien stuff is way more important to her than recognizing and responding to the abuse that she's experiencing. She does crazy shit. This is very much about like what it means to not conform in a society where that is like a very big concern, and like what happens when you don't conform. And like how far you can go in terms of not conforming. This gets crazy. Hey baby, there's cannibalism involved. It starts off really light with like a like their children, and she has a cousin who is also her boyfriend. Kind of weird. It's pretty weird. It's pretty fucking weird. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's pretty fucking weird and jarring. I'll be like enjoying something. It's like, oh, we're in a whimsical little area, and then something horrific happens. It was so good. It was so good. It was satisfying. I felt reading it. I loved the characters. I loved the characters. The 3 main characters. What's their names? Natsuki. And there's Yu, the cousin, and then there's Natsuki's husband. As they get older in the book. I loved the characters so much. I loved them so much. And I wanted to spend more time with them at the end. Like I was like, oh man, it's already over. And I was just like really loving and getting to know these characters. Oh no. But the whole time it was just horrible what this girl experienced. And even though the morality of things that she's done is questionable, I was happy to see her happy. Yeah. So yeah, I would put this probably S tier because it was like, ooh, it was special. Yeah. Next book, Junebat by John Elizabeth Stintzi. This is my 3rd book by them. This is a poetry collection that they wrote while they were in isolation and kind of discovering their identity while they were in between like work opportunities that were important to them and being really isolated in a place that they weren't familiar with. And Junebat is the concept of a Junebat is that it's kind of like a metaphor. It's used in a lot of different ways. There's not a clear definition of what a Junebat is. It's a metaphor for all these different confusing feelings that they experience, and the feeling of displacement, the feeling of like, am I even real? All these feelings that I have even real? How do I express this in a world that doesn't? They're non-binary. That's important. They're non-binary. So they're struggling to understand this about themselves and how they want to be in the world, and they're not feeling recognized. They're not sure how to how they want to be in the world. And they get into a relationship about halfway through that makes them feel a lot more safe and welcome to express themselves. And it puts them on a track of like figuring out what their next goal in life is, emerging from depression and isolation. And it was really beautiful. It was really beautiful. If you're trans and you're experiencing or have experienced these difficulties with understanding and accepting your identity and figuring out how do you want to live in the world, this was really good. This was really good. My cat loves cuddles. She's distracting me. I know. I'm gonna keep talking though. Okay. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Phillip K. Dick. I was interested in this just because I was like reading about androids and learning about AI and stuff. And it's supposed to be like the classic. It's supposed to be the inspiration for Blade Runner and Cyberpunk. It's a future where it's like she got tired of me talking. All right, that's all right. It's a future where it's post-nuclear. Like nuclear war has already, like people are we're in the experience of fallout. And a lot of people on Earth have moved to Mars. There's like programs in place to encourage people to move to Mars. And the encouragement is, hey, if you go to Mars, we'll give you an android companion that's gonna like help you, do what it can be. Basically, it can be your slave if you want it to be. Like you can have it do your chores, you can have it do this and that. Like you'll be taken care of. You just go to Mars, get off this planet, get off this fucking planet. There's a lot of people who still stay behind on Earth. They still choose to stay behind, even though long term it's bad for their health. And this guy, this main character, it's his job. There's androids who escape from Mars because they feel like they're slaves there. There's androids who escape from Mars and come back to Earth. Androids aren't allowed on Earth. And android technology is becoming so advanced that it's becoming harder and harder to tell androids apart from humans. And so it's this guy's job to find these androids on Earth and take them out. And how did I feel about it? I don't know. I felt it was kind of reductive at times. All of the androids were like violent. All of the androids had violent tendencies. And it was very like paying a lot of attention to like, these guys aren't human. This isn't human. But also sexualizing the android. There was a lot of attention put on the female androids and their body parts. Okay. It made me uncomfortable. And the main character, that's what he blamed his compassion for the androids on. It was like, I'm just sexually attracted to them. That's why I feel for them. That's all. It was a little weird. I'm not gonna lie. I did not like it that much, so I'm gonna be done with that. I Hope We Choose Love by Cheng Thom. A Trans Girl's Notes from the End of the World. This is a 3-part essay and story collection. How do I feel about this? Oh my god. It made me sad. I mean, it's called I Hope We Choose Love, which is like beautiful. Beautiful title, but and it was partly hopeful, but partly she talked a lot about her experience being in queer community and being in conflict in queer community, running into conflict in queer community. She talks about cancel culture. She talks about the Me Too movement. She talks about addressing abuse and violence within communities and how oftentimes communities fail to address and prevent violence because they she calls, oh, there was a word she used, Queerlandia. Queerlandia. It's like this fantastical idea that like all the enemies are on the outside. All the enemies are on the outside of the community, the straight people, all the other people who don't understand and are like bigoted towards us. We're like, this is Queerlandia, where we are all accepting and loving of each other. Of course nothing bad would happen here, and of course shit does happen. Abuse, violence happens in every community. And so she was talking about her experiences of seeing this, of seeing the violence that goes unaddressed, and trying to imagine ways that we could address it, ways that we could change things. And I liked her ideas, I liked her suggestions. I didn't agree with everything she said, especially about punishment and revenge. She's very anti-punishment. She thinks that that's not a great way to teach people to be better. And I'm not sure if I agree with that. I feel like punishment can serve a purpose, and sometimes punishment is best for everyone involved, to protect everyone involved, even just barring someone from community as punishment. She had a lot of cool ideas. Like I think the main message that I got is that we need to approach these situations with nuance rather than from our traumatized perspective. And that's a big thing too that she called out, like the fact that a lot of people who are drawn to queer community, they didn't have it in their home lives, they didn't have it from their parents or where they grew up, and so they have this trauma that might have them, you know, reenacting it or responding to it in the same way that they did in the past, which is not necessarily helpful. Yeah, that's the part that made me sad, was recognizing periods in my life, times where I also witnessed that. Communities failing. Communities that were built on compassion and safety and solidarity, failing to address violence and conflict. Yeah, in the last section was talking about identity, talking about the intersections of transness, sex work. She's East Asian, so she talked about some experiences with that. I thought it was beautiful and real shit. You know, I don't agree with everything she said, but I'm glad she said it. Damn. All right. Thank you, Cheng, Thom. I am interested in more from this author. The Service by Frankie Miren. This book is about sex workers in London. Sex workers in London. It's not that fun. There's three main characters. One of them is a woman, she's a single mom, and she does sex work. That's kind of the only occupation that is available to her, because she has a record. And the second main character is a college student who decides to do escort work because her mental illness it makes other occupations hard for her to do. And then the third woman is a anti-sex work activist, who is a so-called feminist who wants to protect women, but in fact the policies and the laws that she pushes for hurt women, make their lives harder, make it harder for them to leave sex work as an occupation. And the book, the key thing in this book when it starts is like, advertising has been made illegal. Advertising sex work, all these websites that were used for advertising sex work online and for screening clients has been shut down. And now it's harder, it's become more dangerous to do sex work, and that's where everything, falls through. And that third girl, who is an anti-sex work activist, was a part of why that law was passed. And this is the law that has been passed in the United States a few years ago. I think it's called the Basta Sesta Act or something like that, regulating sex work being advertised online. And that has had a dangerous effect on sex workers within the United States. So this was imagining what it would be like in the UK if they passed that law. And it makes a lot of people's lives harder. Um, Particularly the first woman, Lori. Lori is the single mother. Freya is a so wild, so interesting. Um, Lori goes through some hard shit. Freya, um, we get a look into her mind a lot. She deals with dissociation and also hallucinations, and she's very spiritual minded. She interprets people as having like auras and energies around them and colors and stuff. And her perspective is very interesting. I feel like almost a little magical. And the anti-sex work activist, she was trouble-minded, and over time I think she came to, like, as she got even deeper into these circles of anti-sex work people and finding herself in the same spaces as conservative people, as like anti-feminist people who are also anti-sex work, finding herself in these spaces and realizing slowly like how far down a hole she's gotten and how far removed from the reality of the situation she is. I don't think that she fully gets it by the end, but shit happens that makes it different. Shit happens. It's the when all three characters are like completely separate, but by the end they all know have some connection with each other, and it was amazing. I loved the characters, I loved the story, I loved everything that they dived into about the effects of anti-sex work legislation and what it, like, kind of demystifying what sex work looks like. It's a job like any other, like, I mean, not like any other. I mean, you can't. It is a job. It is a job. You have to learn skills. You have to apply skills, and it looks different nowadays. It looks different than most people have in their mind of, like, especially the woman who, is anti-sex work. A lot of people seem to think that, like, oh, these sex workers, they don't actually like their jobs. They're just being told to do this because they have pimps who are forcing them to. And it's like, no, there's a lot of reasons that people join this occupation, ranging everywhere from poverty to disability to, like, a lot of shit. And if you want people to not have to do survival sex work, don't make it harder for them to leave the occupation. Yeah, it was an amazing story. Amazing story. It was a long book. For like the first 100 pages, we were just like getting to know them, but then it really picked up, and I was like, oh my god, it was a page turner. Yeah, it was so interesting and it covered so much. I've never learned so much about sex work before. Yeah. Thank you, Frankie Miren. Another one with Frankie Miren because I liked it, so I was like, okay, we're gonna try another. This one is partnered as a co-written by Alison Rumfitt too, which is another author I like. Morbid obsessions on trans and sex worker bodies and writing fiction from the margins. So it starts off with 2 short stories written by each of them. Largely connecting like the internet with the rise of like hate speech and like fuel for hatred and fuel for like morbidly obsessing over their bodies, and where this comes from. It ends with a conversation between the two characters. It doesn't end with, after the stories, it has a conversation between the 2 authors about like what their experiences are writing this kind of things and what their goals are with their writing. And it was really good. It was like interesting. They're both from the UK, so there's some things that I don't necessarily know a whole lot about, but like, I mean, same shit, same shit happens over here in the United States. And then it ends with an interview of this woman, Natalia Santana Mendes, who was a trans sex worker from Brazil who did migrant work migrant sex work in London. And there was an interview of her done about a year before her death. And she talks about her perspective as like even more marginal. The two authors of this book are white, and so I feel like that inclusion of her at the end was showing like the perspective of someone who was even more marginalized and didn't necessarily have a platform for their voice to be put out there. And they put that shit in. They put that shit in. All right. It was great. If you don't know too much about these topics, this would be an awesome introduction. Yeah. Okay, last book. My Year of Meats by Ruth Ozeki. Let me think. This is about a documentarian. The main character is a documentarian. That's a big word. Whoa. She gets a job working for a television production called My American Wife. And the pitch is that this is in the 90s. America is trying to export more beef to Japan. The main character is half Japanese, half white. And so she's able to kind of navigate these things. And the goal of there's a lot of tension between the goals of the production company and its sponsors and the goals of her. Like they want to market beef. They want to market beef and they want to market traditional wifely American values to Japan. And her goal is to show Japanese people a more nuanced view of America. And she's also wants to include like some anti-racist stuff, anti-racist stuff, anti-homophobic stuff within her piece. She finds ways to include. She like goes into it following their rules, and over time starts making episodes that are more raw, authentic, showing like things that people don't normally think about. She has like a family with disabilities, multiple families with disabilities. There's a family with adopted children, all cooking meat. That's the point of each show. Each show, it introduces you to a family, and then that family cooks some meat, and American meat. And then it encourages the people in Japan at home, the wives at home, to cook that for their husbands. And it goes between her perspective and another woman's perspective whose name is Akiko, who is actually the wife of other Jane's boss. Jane's boss is a dick. He's a horrible man, troubled. And he abuses his wife. And this wife, through watching this show that Jane is producing, is starting to realize how she's unhappy with her life, how actually what she's experiencing doesn't feel normal, and it doesn't feel happy, it doesn't make her feel safe or right. And it inspires her to like leave him eventually, like establish some power and leave him finally. And it was a long road to get there. It was a long road to get here. It's a whole year. It's a whole year of meats. And Jane, on her side, like while Akiko is learning about herself and learning about like what she doesn't like and what she does like, and she's finding that my husband criticizes me so much, but actually I'm really good at certain things. You know, while she's discovering this about herself, Jane is discovering about the meat industry, a lot more about the meat industry. She's starting to turn against it. And in the last episode she's just directing it actually. In the last episode she's directing, she filmed a slaughterhouse and a feedlot. And it was basically, her purpose was to make it an expose. And like she learns throughout it. The whole time, it begins with just like hints about like hormone treatments, about antibiotics in cattle and hormones and how this affects people when they eat it and stuff. It also talks about fertility. Yeah, like the hormones that are given to cattle impact people's fertility. It impacts his testosterone levels. It impacts sperm counts. It impacts the way that uteruses develop. And that's a problem that Jane experiences. Both of the main characters have difficulties with pregnancy, and that's a big deal too. There's a lot of sad stuff in here. There's a lot of emotional stuff, but it's also funny. It's also funny. I can't downplay that at all, because it's funny as fuck. Okay, even in the dark moments, there's moments where it's like something horrible happens, something absolutely horrible happens, and then it's like, well, that was a little much. Just like it always brings us there's always a little what's the word? Comedic effect? Is that what it is? Comedic relief. Yeah, comedic relief. It's dealing with some heavy topics, a lot of information, but also with comedic relief. And it was highly illuminating and a great story. Very 90s. There's some things I would say is pretty outdated. She plays with stereotypes a lot. It's very satirical. But it was such a good book. It was such a good book, and it was such a great time. Yeah, I loved it. So yeah, that is all of the books that I've got today. My cat is impatiently waiting for me to be done and finally spend time with her. Little baby. And so I'm gonna do that. I will see you guys next month. Bye bye.